when I drop back into my being, it is more back and then opening forwards into the body, and the impetus of the breath seems to come from the being. As soon as I do drop back into that, there's a instantly opens into a big breath. And in holographic breathing, you know, a lot of people pass out in holographic breathing, and a lot of people drift off when I'm talking. And when I listen to the recordings of me talking, I also drift off. I'm not immune to that. But I think there's a fundamental part of holographic breathing that is how we breathed in the womb, even though there was not air there. For me, there is a movement of the anatomy and a movement of the cells that opens in holographic breathing, worked in that way in the womb, is magnified through the birth process, and is enacted in breastfeeding, which all relates to holographic breathing. And so I think quite often people are dropping back to that experience. Now, it may not be per se a memory of being in their mother's womb, and I don't often experience it as that. I experience it as an intrinsic part of my experience or reality that is the same as when we're in the womb. So you can go back to a memory of being in the womb and there is that breath there. Or you can just engage in that breath and experience as an intrinsic part of you. So you're not per se dealing with another person. You haven't got your mother per se in the experience. You've got an internal representation of that in yourself. So I drop back into that a lot. And I think people are dropping into that in holographic breathing. And whatever the channel is that comes through me is to do with that, I think. And maybe that's why people pass out a lot, maybe go to sleep, because in the womb, the baby did probably spend a lot of time asleep. But in the womb, or that intrinsic experience within ourselves, we are living in our beings. There is no intellect there. In that space, when the baby is being formed at that time, there is no intellect, and most people are enamored with their intellect. They have kind of become their intellect. So if you're going back to that place where you're living in the being and you're enshrouded in the intellect, unless you do move back into your own being, so you're viewing it from your being, most people will just go to sleep. So today we're going to look at ways of entering and experiencing our beings. And so I'm not sure of the timing. I know in Ayurvedic texts they say that the spirit or the being comes down into the womb kind of 8 or 10 weeks after the baby is forming, because it's too small before that time? I don't know. A lot of women experience the presence coming down in conception, so who really knows? But the baby is very small. The being has been existing just as a being without a body, so the consciousness is just happy and used to living in the being, and it comes down and there's a body there, and it slowly integrates with the body. And the cells in the baby are reproducing, but they're not just ping, 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 producing. They're filling out a matrix. They're filling out a universal matrix in the format of mankind. And for me, the being is holding that matrix. So the cells are reproducing, but they're filling out a matrix. The being is that matrix, or the being is connected to the matrix, and the baby is connecting, and more they kind of become one. It becomes a being with a body, and all the different organs, all the different cells are aligned and integrated and fill out the matrix of the being. And if you think about it, on a fundamental level of health, you can do your diet, you can meditate, you can do this, you can do that. But the most or for me, probably the most fundamental thing for your health is that connection with your being. Because if the being goes, your body dies. As simple as that. If the being leaves in the womb, the baby dies. When you come to the end of your time here on earth, what marks that transit is where the being leaves the body. Then the body is dead. You know, it's getting closer and closer to death, but it still has life in it. It still has a being in it. When the being leaves, and suddenly it is dead. And then people experience being in their being again, because you get reports of people who've died and come back and say, wow, that was amazing, it was beautiful, I wasn't upset, it felt great, there was no pain, I started going to this lovely place, and that bloody nurse kept on hitting my body to come back into it. So the being, and as soon as the being re-enters the body, there's an in-breath. It instigates the breath. As soon as the being arrives back in the body, the first thing that happens is you breathe in and come back. So the body in some cases is dead. The heart has stopped working, the brain has stopped working, the being's gone, the being re-enters, and it all starts again. So as we continue through our lives, things happen to us. We become more associated with our body, we become more associated with our emotions, and after a time we become more associated with our intellect. And then as we get older and older, more and more people just become their intellect and less aware of their being or living in their being. And so say a trauma happens and the body goes out of a bit of alignment because of that. There may be that, oh, you're holding a trauma in a certain way. But the being holds the original matrix. So just on a level, if you let the being come in, it will, doesn't matter what the trauma was, it will start making its way back to that original alignment, that original health before that certain things happen. So you can look at traumas, this happened, that happened, that happened, and I did this to accommodate to it. But also you may have disconnected from the being in a certain aspect in yourself. So on a fundamental level of health, and what I'm starting, because I can't say that I'm a professor in this or know a huge amount of it, but we are going to investigate it. You know, I investigate it for myself. We're going to investigate it together, that connection to the being and the quality of living in the being and having a body and emotions and intellect, rather than being a body and emotions and intellect, and somewhere that we don't quite know how to contact, there's a being. So we're going to learn how to do that, and we're going to breathe with the connection between the being and the body. Now, I had a Kundalini awakening, I don't know, 9 years, quite a while ago anyway now. And for me it was terrifying and lasted, well, it didn't stop really, I just became used to it. But part of that, as well as this incredible energy going through my spine and through my head, what happened in that, I could no longer live where I was living before, which was kind of in the area of the brain. My guess is that I just dropped back into the being. Once you can't be in the intellect anymore, you're viewing it, and you're viewing it from somewhere. So I'm calling that the being, whether it is or not. But ever since that point, not only did I have this energy going off, but I always had this feeling, to one level or another, that I was kind of watching myself. I wasn't disassociated, you know, there were all the connections there, but on a subtle level I wasn't the person I was before. I was kind of watching me, and at the time it was very, very disconcerting, but I have kind of got used to that. And what we started doing for the last few webinars is to notice where we're viewing from. When we're viewing our anatomy, you know, normally it's be aware of or view your anatomy. But as soon as you bring in the equation of where am I viewing from, then you're including the viewer. There's someone viewing it, and for me that's the being. There's a reality that's the being. So you may not feel the quality of the being, you may not feel exactly where it is, but you can feel the area within that you're viewing from. And as soon as you're brought back to that perspective, where are you viewing from? Where are you feeling from? It's just the same as saying, in the similar area of saying, who am I? You're asking, where am I? And in that positioning, you carry on doing that, you start getting the quality of who you are and who is the viewer. So for me, that is spread through the whole body, but generally it's slightly back from the body. Generally, when I'm viewing me, it's kind of little bit back. I can be inside myself, or it can be a little bit back. Now that might be different for different people, and my feeling is that people think of the spirit or the being as one thing, one energy. But on becoming used to this, I don't for myself. I feel the being as a higher matrix of ourselves. When I'm viewing my cranium and face, I'm more in that energy of the being, of that higher energy of the being. And when I'm viewing into my heart and lungs, I'm kind of more viewing from the heart and lungs of the being, which is a lower, more grounded energy within the being. And when I'm viewing the pelvis or abdomen, it's coming from that lower energy in the being. So it's not like one spiritual energy. It is another level of the human matrix, or a matrix which has several different energies for me, because I don't want to tell you what it is. All of this is my experience of it. When you go with the meditations that we're going to do, you may have a completely different experience of that, and that is fine. And for me it is different because I just had that experience 8 or 9 years ago, and ever since I've kind of been viewing myself to one level or another. So people may go into a different experience than I have of it. So we will just have to see as it goes along. So we're going from that emphasis. We are still going to be working with how the lungs work, how the spine works, but we'll also be working with how the spirit opens up through the spine, how the lungs, how the spine opens up from the spirit, and then how the lungs open up from the spine. So we will be working on that, but we'll be adding this particular quality to it.